All right, we are back on the Young Turks, and Ron Paul's been getting a lot of heat lately over some old newsletters from the 80s and 90s where they had written some terrible stuff in those Ron Paul newsletters. Let me just give you an example here. Order was only restored in L.A., they said, after the Rodney King riots, when it came time for the blacks to pick up their welfare checks. That's atrocious. We've shown you 18 different atrocious quotes. I'll give you one more if you haven't seen it before. It said, opinion polls consistently show only about 5% of blacks have sensible political opinions. Now, these are disastrous, but Ron Paul has said, hey, look, I didn't know that this was in my newsletters, even though the newsletters are named after him. He said, I didn't even read these things or even know about it for 10 years afterwards.
Now, before I read it to you, let me just make this note. Ron Paul supporters who say, hey, well, he didn't write it, somebody else did. Give it up, dude. Okay? I'm not interested in that defense at all. You're going to tell me that somebody let this kind of writing go on for decades in his name and didn't do anything about it? Even if he didn't write it, that he's not complicit in that? Oh, come on. You'd have to be an idiot or cult of personality obsessed fool to believe that Ron Paul didn't believe this stuff when he wrote it in the Ron Paul newsletter for decades and decades. So, you say, oh, well, how bad could it be? Well, let's find out. He referred to Martin Luther King Day, it was, of course, against Martin Luther King Day, and referred to it as Hate Whitey Day. And he criticized Ronald Reagan for passing it. But, oh, he's just getting warmed up. That was no big deal compared to the other things. He said that Martin Luther King was X-rated, and then get a load of these lies. A world-class philanderer who beat up his paramours, seduced underage girls and boys. Okay, I mean, it's just this stuff is sick. And then, I guess my favorite one out of all these made-up things about Martin Luther King is made a pass at fellow civil rights leader Ralph Abernathy. How the hell would you even know that? What, did Abernathy tell you that Martin Luther King made a pass at him? And what, he whispered it in the ear of racist Ron Paul? Get the out of here, man. Come on. And then they published this newsletter, and they claim they got a circulation of hundreds of thousands of people, and they put this crap in, and then he goes, what? What, racist? I don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah, Martin Luther King's a pedophile, and Martin Luther King Day is Hate Whitey Day, but I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not racist. Well, it gets worse.
Well, the problem is, here he is on tape in 1995 talking about those same newsletters.
I also do an investment letter. It's called the Ron Paul Survival Report, and I put that out on a monthly basis, which is a gold-oriented newsletter, but it's also expressing concern about surviving in this age of big government.
Well, that has, of course, cost him some supporters, but it's also gained him some supporters. And one of those supporters is apparently Stormfront, which bills itself as White Pride Worldwide. A blog poster now, not the guy who runs it, but a poster on the website said the reason that he supports Ron Paul is because he opposes Jewish supremacists, the Fed control of the money supply, and because he opposes Americans engaging wars for Israel rather than America's interests. That is unfortunate. But actually the director, Don Black, said, we understand that Paul is not a white nationalist, but most of our people support him because of his stand on the issues. And Don Black, the director of Stormfront, joins us now. Don, welcome to the program. And
oh, thank you.
Yeah, I want to get right into it. So you say that he's not a white nationalist, but you support him anyway. Are you disappointed that he's not a white nationalist?
Well, it is what it is. He's clearly not a white nationalist. He does not have the same worldview we do. But we agree with him. His stand on the issues, which we believe are heartfelt, coincide with ours. I might prefer that he understand the racial issues that we deal with a little more than he does. Our purpose, we believe that white people in this country and in all European countries, Australia, Canada, are facing a form of genocide through assimilation.
Yeah, I know. Well,
millions
you know, Don,
legal and illegal aliens are brought here. That is genocide. So Ron Paul does not obviously agree with that.
Right.
But he does believe in securing our borders, and he wants to get us out of all of these trillion-dollar wars.
Given the links on your website given the links on your website to neo-Nazis, it's kind of ironic that you're against genocide, I guess. But Don, I don't. Are you claiming that in America, where every single president has been white, and I can go down a list of all the important, powerful positions being completely and utterly white, that white people do not have enough power in this country?
That is all changed, of course. Obviously, all presidents have not been white, and whites will soon become, according to all census projections, a minority in this country.
So you think Obama is now, of course, Obama's not white, so previous to him, everybody was white. You think Obama's a harbinger of things to come? That's it? White people are out, black people are going to be president from now on? JR, man, that's pretty good news, don't you think? Really? I mean, seriously, Don, I mean, do you really think that? I'm just curious. Or is it like something you do to sell stuff?
It's no question that we are becoming, will be a minority. And we have white politicians like Bill Clinton who openly applauded that fact, the fact that how wonderful everything would be when this traditionally white country, and it was traditionally white, of course, as you point out, our presidents and government has traditionally been white. Well, that is all changing, of course. It's obviously changing. But more, our concern is the fact that we believe our very survival is at stake. No other countries, no African country is faced with tens of millions of outside, say, Asians coming into their countries. Asian countries aren't faced with this kind of massive immigration. And so this is a threat to our survival through assimilation.
Don, there's a great irony there because they come to this country because we represent equality for all, which you want to then stop. So then I guess they would stop coming because then we'd be a racist country. But Don, let's go back to Ron Paul for a second. What made you a fan of Ron Paul? I mean, you say he's not a white nationalist. You say he doesn't understand the coming genocide. So what was it about him that attracted you to him?
Because his stand on the issues coincide with ours. I knew about the newsletters, of course, when they were being printed. I certainly was under the impression Ron Paul wrote them. I'm now convinced he did not write them.
God, that is so stupid.
And they don't really reflect his views. Some of the quotes that are being pulled out are a little bit out of context, but many of them are over-the-top hyperbole, kind of thing you would expect to see posted on a message board on the internet, perhaps. But his stand, his heartfelt positions on the issues are coincide with ours.
So it's interesting that you know. Did you say that you thought his newsletters were over the top? Like even you run a website for White Pride Worldwide. You read the newsletters and you thought, wow, that's really over the top?
LA riots ended because of the National Guard and the police, not because blacks had to go pick up their welfare checks. That's just typical hyperbole, the kind of thing that, cutesy little things that somebody came up with, whoever it was. They were trying to appeal to Ron Paul's paleo-conservative base. They were trying to appeal to Ron Paul's paleo-conservative base. They were trying to appeal to Ron Paul's paleo-conservative base. They were trying to appeal to Ron Paul's paleo-conservative base.
God, that is so stupid. Oh, but come on, somebody else might have written that and said it was Ron Paul, and he only published it for about 20 years straight. What? No, he's not responsible for that. My ass, he's not responsible for that. No, look, Ron Paul might be right about Iraq, and I think he is, but he's so dead wrong about this, let alone other issues, that even considering supporting Ron Paul is nuts.
Is that a code word for racist base?
Paleo-conservative, of course, is a traditional conservative. I don't necessarily consider myself a conservative. I'm not sure what's left to conserve. But paleo-conservatives, yes, of course, accept racial realities. There are racial differences. They're inherent, they're genetic, there's nothing wrong with that. And we understand that. We are racial realists. Paleo-conservatives tend to be racial realists.
There's some irony in using the words racial realism in the context that you used it in. But I want to show you one last thing here, Don. It's a clip from Ron Paul from 1988, and he's talking about why the war on drugs is hurting minorities. I want to have you watch it and then get your reaction, okay?
We do know that opium was used by the Chinese, and the Chinese were not welcomed in this country. We do know that the blacks at times use heroin, opium, and the laws have been used against them. There has been times that it's been recognized that the Latin Americans used marijuana, and the laws have been written against them. But lo and behold, the drug that inebriates most of the members of Congress has not been touched because they're over there drinking alcohol.
God, that is so stupid.
Now, there, Ron Paul is saying that he's against the war on drugs, partly because he wants to protect minorities from the discrimination that they're facing on the war on drugs. Does that disappoint you?
God, that is so stupid.
No, it doesn't disappoint me. I want the government out of our business everywhere, all our lives. I think the war on drugs is an excuse, just like the war on terrorism, for a police state. And our Constitution is being scrapped. I believe in individual liberties. I believe in freedom. And I don't want some jackbooted thug, to use one description, kicking down my door or anybody else's. And of course, drugs are just, if people want to use drugs, that's their business. They're hurting themselves. But the war on drugs is just it's a farce.
Right.
Like Ron Paul says, it should be canceled.
Right. And I want the audience to understand something. You know, there are some things that people that we massively disagree with can come to the same conclusion. So, for example, Don and Ron Paul agree on getting out of the wars. So do I, right? That doesn't mean that because Don supports Ron Paul, that Ron Paul supports Don, all right? And the fact that I disagree with the wars doesn't mean that I support Ron Paul. But I just wanted everybody to get the proper context. I wanted them to find out why Don was supporting Ron Paul, which doesn't necessarily mean that Ron Paul is supporting Don's group. He has, you know, said that he's not happy if you guys try to do voter turnout for him or whatever it might be. But I wanted people to get a clear view. An example here. Order was only restored in L.A., they said, after the Rodney King riots, when it came time for the blacks to pick up their welfare checks. That's atrocious. We've shown you 18 different atrocious quotes. I'll give you one more if you haven't seen it before. It said,
At all. You're going to tell me that somebody let this kind of writing go on for decades in his name and didn't do anything about it? Even if he didn't write it, that he's not complicit in that? Oh, come on. You'd have to be an idiot.
Opinion polls consistently show only about 5% of blacks have sensible political opinions. Now, these are disastrous. But Ron Paul has said, hey, look, I didn't know that this was in my newsletters, even though the newsletters are named after him. He said, I didn't even read these things or even know about it for 10 years afterwards.
Now, before I read it to you, let me just make this note. Ron Paul supporters who say, hey, well, he didn't write it, somebody else did. Give it up, dude. Okay, I'm not interested in that defense.
All right, we are back on the Young Turks, and Ron Paul has been getting a lot of heat lately over some old newsletters from the 80s and 90s where they had written some terrible stuff in those Ron Paul newsletters. Let me just give you